And he's joining me right now to talk about Spike's Core Radio. New episodes every Wednesday. The man himself, Spike Feresten, joins us. Spike, how you doing this morning?
I'm well. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing good, man. Well, look, congratulations on the show, because I know you've been plugging along on this thing for a long time now. Several years you've been doing Spike's Core Radio. It's had some different iterations. It's on YouTube now on a beautiful set, mind you. It looks great. The show looks great.
Thank you.
I've been checking out all the episodes, man. But you've kept at the Core Radio, and it just seems to really have found its audience, and it's a dedicated audience, and you don't run out of topics to talk about in the core world.
No, and my wife can attest to that. She says save it for the microphone. You know, people ask me about podcasting all the time, and I didn't know what I know now, which is you gotta be ready to do like 2 years a show, a couple hundred shows before you find an audience. And for me, it was easy because, you know, I was just hanging out with my friends once a week. So I'd call up Jerry, or I'd call up my friend Paul Zuckerman, who's a lawyer, or Johnny Lieberman, or Matt Farah. And I go, hey, you want to smoke a couple cigars and just, you know, get some food and talk in front of the mics for an hour? And, you know, here we are 7 years later. You know, we you know, get it. We've got a decent sized audience now, and they want us to be on YouTube. We don't understand why, because we all look ridiculous and we're old. And they said, we want to see the cars. That's a decent reason. So here we are.
Yeah, and you know what? The thing with podcasting too is, yes, it takes a long time. Consistency is key. And the other thing is finding that niche audience, you know, because there's a
Right.
million or 2 or 3 or 5 million podcasts, however many there are, and it's finding that one sliver of the world's interest that you can kind of really deliver to them consistently.
Yeah. And our first clue was we were having coffee in Malibu about 10 years ago, and someone was recording our conversation, writing it down, and then published a piece of it in this little Malibu newspaper. And my friends were a little upset about it, but I was like, this seems, if people are interested in what we're talking about. It was just our families, it was cars, and it was entertainment. And we thought, well, maybe we record this and see if it's anything.
And what's cool about the show too is, yes, obviously there's a lot of core talk on it, as you know, its name's Core Radio, Spike's Core Radio. But you go into different topics, like you even talk about Jerry being on there, and you were talking about the SNL 50 and the
Right.
beef that there used to be between the sketch artists and the stand-ups, and now
Yeah,
SNL's all stand-ups.
exactly
And
right.
I mean, it's really interesting. It's an interesting conversation to have, especially on that, because I didn't really know that there was a beef
Yeah.
between the stand-ups and the sketch artists, and that's something
What?
that you get into.
It wasn't so much a beef as they kind of looked down at stand-ups then. And I say in the show, I was kind of guilty of it myself. I was like, why would these guys want to spend a weekend at the Chuckle Hut? Now, you know, you've got these forces of nature like Bill Burr and, you know, these guys selling out Sebastian Maniscalco.
Yeah.
They're selling out stadiums, you know. In some ways they are bigger now than the TV that they were kind of looked down upon back in the day.
Well, and that's really where a lot of the media has changed, right? Whereas SNL still is, you know, it still is a star maker, but people become on popular through podcasts. Like when I was growing up, and it was probably around when you're writing on Letterman, and Letterman was the biggest deal in the world, you know,
Mhm.
and he was my guy, and then Conan became my guy. I love Jay as well. I mean, I have a picture of Johnny behind me, but I love those late night hosts, and you as well on Fox. And now it seems like where comics go to get broken are podcasts and the internet. I mean, they become, you know, literally shows like yours. You know, obviously there's the Rogans of the world and things like that. That's where comics go
Yeah,
specifically to
yeah.
get an audience and to promote their stand-up dates and really cultivate a following.
Yeah, it's true. And it all starts, I mean, it started for me over social media. You'd see, you know, a number of these guys like Theo Vaughn, or, you know, and they're in these little clips. Bobby Lee, he's got a podcast, Bad Friends, and you'll
Yeah.
see these little moments that they pulled out that are really funny, and you're like, God, what is this? You know, and these guys just, you know, they're characters, they're showing their personality, and they're having funny kind of off the wall conversations that are really small but end up being really funny when kind of yanked out of the larger show, and then that drives you to the show, and it drives you to go see them perform because you're like, now I think I know these guys a little better. I've seen them kind of with their hair down, just relaxing but being really funny. Maybe I'll go to the Improv tonight and check them out. You know what I mean? It's a really interesting little ecosystem.
Yeah, it's where it's gotten. Like, whereas the Bobby Lee, short on TikTok is what Crispin Glover being on Letterman was.
Yeah,
So it's
right.
like this viral
Yeah,
clip
yeah.
that everyone's talking about, and it's shared 1,000 times, and or millions of times, really. But and you had that recently, even with the story of Jerry at the Meekum auctions and
hmm
not selling the $25 million car or whatever the case was. Be that story was everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good example of. We also had, I think, on one of our first shows, we had Jay Leno on talking about his fall. He was on a
Yeah.
hotel hill and he was trying to get a roast beef sandwich or something, and he decided to shortcut it down a small hill and rolled down the hill, bruised his face, went to CVS, got an eye patch, and then went right on stage and performed, and he just happened to be on our show a few weeks later, and that also was like breaking news. And you're right, it reminded me of the days of kind of being back in late night. And I remember once being in a rental car bus at Logan and hearing my show, going, wow, look at that, that is something we'd done about the View, or some joke we had made about them, of which there many have been made, was on the rental bus. And it's the same way now with podcasting. If you're in the moment and you're with somebody who people care about and something's happened to them, or they say something that they shouldn't say, or like Jerry said, here's what really happened to the car, it gets picked up. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and there's really no rhyme or reason or knowing really how you can't. I don't think you can fabricate something to go viral. It just does,
You
and
can't. Well, you
especially.
can and you can't, but
Yeah, yeah, I guess you're right.
like when Jerry came on, it's like, look, you haven't really talked about this yet. I'm going to ask you about it. So, heads up, prepare something. I'm ready. So, and I had an idea it might, but when it comes to like comedy writing, you're exactly right. And someone told me that early on. It might have been Rob Burnett, who is the head writer and producer of Letterman. He said, just keep making stuff because you'll never know which little thing, just like you said, Brett, you'll never know which thing suddenly pops. So, but as long as you're making things every day, you'll see out of nowhere things will start to go. And at the time we were on Hulu, our secondary window was on Hulu, this Fox show we did, and sure
Mhm.
enough, he was right. These things started popping. We had no idea that it was going to be those pieces, and the stuff we really worked on and said, "This is it." Nope,
Yeah, it didn't get any reaction, right? Yeah,
didn't get
it's
anything.
It's funny how that works. Now, I'm not what you would call a car aficionado, but I'm around people who are car
Mm,
aficionados, right? I have a buddy who runs a place here in Houston called Driver Source, which, they have the F1 McLaren over there. They have like a Jaguar that was in Wolf of Wall Street. They have like the car collections, though. A big car collections. They curate them for people. And then, like you, I have a close personal injury attorney friend. Um,
Very useful friend.
Very useful friend to have for a variety of situations, but he too is a car guy, but he has been on this, I think, kind of bad luck string of Bentleys. And I wanted to
uh,
ask you about it because he had a 2012 Brookline that
hmm
he had trouble selling. It was
Yeah.
Thunder Blue, I think was the color. He had he currently has a 2016 Bentley Flying Spur Havana Brown with 22,000 miles on it. Kind of not a whole lot on there. Peanut butter leather interior. It was on Bring a Trailer. Crickets. Nobody
Yep.
wanted it.
Yes.
And then he had a 2002 Bentley Azure Molnier convertible that again was a hard sell for him. And so the Bentleys aren't doing well. And I'm asking, is that like a common trend amongst the stateside car collectors
It's
that
really
Bentleys
funny.
aren't?
You're bringing this up because we just had, you might not know this fella, but his name is James Pumphrey, and he was formerly of Donut Media. He's got a new channel on YouTube called Speed with an extra E in it.
Okay.
And he was talking about this very thing, the top 10 cool cars you could buy for $25,000 or less and going through them. And I noticed at number 8 was the Bentley Continental. I said, "What the hell is that?" That's a brand new Bentley. And he goes, and it's the depreciation is swift. It's fast. And he's talking about taking one. And I think Paul, the law firm, the lawyer guy, is going to sponsor it. He's talking about taking a Bentley to a smash up derby, and doing. And I went, "Wow!" He goes, "It's never been done." He goes, "But that's where these cars land a lot of times. There are cars that truly depreciate quickly that are very expensive right out of the gate. In that way, that Bentley is a little like a boat. The
Well, I mean,
happiest
is
day
it
you have with it is that first day, and then see you later.
then the last day you have it, right?
Yeah,
Is your
they're great,
happiest
and
day.
by the way, they're great cars, and I drive them all the time. I get press cars, and they're under the Volkswagen Group umbrella, which is where Porsche lives. And when they took over Bentley, I could feel the difference in the driving experience with the cars. So I can't say that these new ones are going to go in that direction because they really are extraordinary and good drivers if you're the type of person who feels like he can get out of a car like that and feel okay about what that says to the world. That's the only caveat.
Again, we're talking about personal injury lawyers, so I don't think that they have an issue with it.
He doesn't have an issue. No, he wants to, and this is true. These guys want to project success. They
Right.
get the shiny watch, they get the big Bentley car because the person who's walking in there is frequently a working class person who's been injured by like a city bus or something, and their snap appraisal of this lawyer is he's very successful, he has money, I can get the money I deserve, and it's kind of a tactic with these guys.
Now, is like when it comes to like the cars you're saying under the Volkswagen banner, whether it be Porsche seems to be 10 times more desirable than Bentley, just
Yes,
brand name wise.
yes.
And is it because of the how fast they are, how cool they look? Is it a Seinfeld thing because everyone knows Jerry Seinfeld's a Porsche guy? Like why is the Porsche kind of the crown jewel in there?
Oh, well, first of all, I advocate all the time for them to rename the group the Porsche Automotive Group. I really do agree with you. That's what it should be called as the
Yeah.
Volkswagen. But Porsche is, to me, like the Nike. It's that sneaker brand that when you're a kid and you first put on your first pair of Nikes or whatever that is for you, and you go, "Oh wow, I can jump higher, I can run faster." That little feeling is what happened to me the very first time I drove a 911. And frankly, it was not a very expensive 911, but I just went, "Wow, this what they've done here, the engineering and the designers, what they've done is they've created the same feeling that I got the first time I got in a go-kart in my hometown." Like this, a steering wheel and a seat and a belt, and I'm just gonna go fast. And that feeling happened when I got into a Porsche 911, and I went, "Wow, for better or for worse, this is my thing. This is my jam, and I better make some money because they're also expensive."
They're not cheap, are they?
They're not cheap. At the time, I mean, my first one I bought was $6,000. It had hundreds of thousands of miles on it. It was in Georgia. It was a horrible color of brown, sepia brown, which is, it's not a good color. It's poop emoji brown is what I would call it. And I got that car in New York City and I drove it in New York City, and I everything was wrong with it, and I absolutely loved every minute in it, and that's when you found your thing, right? You're willing to put up with the pain of the weekly maintenance costs and everything else because the driving piece of it is just everything.
And the Porsche though seems to have the opposite effect of the Bentley. It seems to appreciate. He's actually a pro wrestler friend of mine. He had an '89 Porsche. I can't remember what model it was, but he just offloaded. He bought it back in the day for 40,000 and offloaded it for a quarter million. I mean, it's just kind of how it goes.
That sounds like a turbo, probably,
Turbo,
but
yes,
yeah.
yes,
It
'89 turbo.
depending on what you have and what you buy, it's all about production numbers. So the modern Porsches that are valuable are what we call the GT cars, GT3s, the 911 ST, anything that's kind of geared towards a little bit of a high speed experience, but with exclusivity, right? So we're only going to make 1,000 of them. We're only going to make 2 or 3,000. That stuff tends to be valuable, and you can sell it even after a few months after buying it and make money on them. Things like Cayennes or Panameras, they're just making too many of them. But those cars are what kind of keeps Porsche afloat. And with that extra cash that they have, this genius guy Andreas Pruniger in Germany, who designs these things, designs these amazing cars that everybody tries to get, and they're hard to get. They're really hard to get. But every once in a while, you get lucky and you get one at sticker, and you just stop. You're happy. GT4 RS is a great car right now. They're also kind of they made they're not that, I don't think they're numbered, but they're fantastic. And those numbers are still good.
Well, we need to rename it the Porsche Automotive Group.
Yeah,
That
let's
sounds
do
like a
it.
good idea. We need to start a petition, do it. We need to do Spike's Car Radio Wednesdays, new episodes out Wednesdays. Now, Spike, I wanted to share this like personal anecdote with
Sure.
you real quick. A few years ago, I was working actually in the realm of education. I'm gonna make this a quick story. And a guy I was working with, we had small talk. He said that he was an actor, and I'm like, okay, cool, you're an actor. What have you been in? Starts listing off shows I'd never heard of. I was in an episode of this. I did a straight to DVD movie with Pat Morita in '97 and things like this. Never heard of it. And then he was like, I was in an episode of Seinfeld. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I know every episode of that kind of like the back of my hand. So I'm thinking, what episode was this guy in? Like, was he
Right.
in the Pony Remark? Was he an extra in the Bubble Boy and in a diner? I couldn't figure out what he was in. So I said, what episode were you in? He said, I was in the Soup Nazi. I'm like,
Hmm.
well, that's a pretty big episode to be in. And I'm trying to place him in my head. And I'm thinking he must have just been standing in line. But no, he had a huge close up in it after Jerry and Elaine get kicked out, or not George or Elaine get kicked out. The camera comes in tight on him and he's shaking his head like this in the episode. And I'm like, I can't believe that you were in the Soup Nazi. And just one of those weird things that you find. But anyway, I wanted to ask you regarding not that episode in particular, but whenever you get an idea for an episode of episodic television or a screenplay like you and Jerry did with Unfrosted, things of this nature, when you get this idea, what's step two? Okay, this sounds funny. Let's make a movie about Pop Tarts. Let's make a movie about the soup Nazi in New
Yeah.
York.
Yeah.
But is it like, do you walk around and try to stimulate the creativity and say, okay, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen? Do you jot a list or do you go straight to writing? Kind of what's the next step for you?
It if I put it on that list, it might disappear into the warehouse. There is a list, but if you take it too quickly and put it on the list, then it's out of your head. A good idea, kind of, you live with it. It's always there. It's popping into your head. You're thinking about it. You start going, huh, is this something? I've learned at this point to kind of put a little net in my head and go, like the soup Nazi, which is just a stray thought about this place I used to get lunch. There are many ideas like that that start so, so small. To pay attention to them, to think about them. I always go, where could this go? And who do I know in that place? Having developed relationships now over many years. And then I start talking it out with people. So with Unfrosted, that was just something we batted around when we had coffee and ran out of things to talk about. Hey, let's talk about that dumb Pop Tart idea. And we'd write scenes. What if George Clooney's in it, and what if he's doing this? And we'd laugh. It just became this riff that we would do. I think since 2013, and it wasn't until the pandemic that I said, God, it's really depressing. We're all home here by ourselves. Let's just get on a Zoom like I'm doing with Brad right now, just with some guys, and let's talk about bat around the idea like we do over coffee. And it was really fun. And we had someone there jotting down the stuff, and actually I was writing down stuff. And then Jerry fired me as the notes taker. He said, we got to get somebody real and introduce this guy Greg in a box. And I'm like, oh, good. And he goes, yeah, I need you focused on the writing part. And before you know it, he was like, this is really something. Let's get together almost every day, work for just a couple hours, And you know, we had a script, and then he said, I want to direct it. Then he said, I want to be in it. And then he said, I'm taking it to Ted Sarandos at Netflix. And then he said, we're making it. You know, so you know, it's really I really do pay attention to small things that pop into my head, little observational things these days. I'll tell you what the only downside is. The internet is awesome at coming up with them first. Like I
Right.
say to my wife all the time, the internet has made it, like I don't know if I could make Seinfeld again, or I didn't make it, Jerry and Larry did, but if I could write for it again, because everything has been discussed and observed at this point. You know, every little detail of marriage is on my Instagram Reels feed, like from the fans blowing on the guy and the wife. I mean, everything has been observed, but you know, still there's stuff that pops up, I think, that no one's thinking about.
Yeah, and it's just constantly, having that in your head and
Yeah,
throwing it
yeah.
around a little bit.
I mean, it's a little like this. You know, I love media. I love all of it. You know, from social media to television to movies. And I always think, well, what am I missing now? What am I not getting that I would like to turn on a Tuesday night, right? And that's a good approach for me.
That is that I like that. Yeah, I'm gonna put that into my own use because but I loved Unfrosted, by the way.
Thank
I
you.
remember watching that movie when Jerry's talking to Snap, Crackle, and Pop, and he's like, "Don't make me bring in Boing. I'll bring in Boing." And I was like, "What a genius line! What a genius line! I love it." Spike's Car Radio, new episodes Wednesday on YouTube. Spike, I really appreciate the time this morning again to chat with you. Love the show, love
Thanks,
what
man.
you're doing, and I'll continue to support in any way I can.
Appreciate that, Brett.